Добрый вечер, дорогие друзья. So I'll try to
Good evening, dear friends.
Because the weather is difficult for getting here. So I'm very pleased to present Bill Morrison, a filmmaker who managed to come to Moscow, and even though he doesn't feel good because he's ill, he's gonna have a short Q&A session with Evgeny Gusyatinsky, film programmer from the Rotterdam Film Festival and film critic. And I'm very, very happy that we have a chance to present this film because it has amazing music and it really presents what archives can be and what can do and how they can touch souls and how they can move the way you think, and also how the film as a media can help doing this. А меня вроде переводили на русский язык, только что я не буду этого делать. So I won't translate myself because we had translators. Welcome on stage, Bill Morrison and Evgeny Gusyatinsky. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. Welcome to the screening of Dawson City, Frozen Time, the latest film of Bill Morrison. Please give him again a warm welcome. As you know, Bill is the most profound contemporary filmmaker who's precisely focused on archival materials, and I think Dawson City is a brilliant and highly artistic example of a found footage film, and it shows us what kind of narratives and new images could be found in an archive. So my first question would be maybe a bit general, but what was the starting point of your preoccupation with an archive? How did it all start?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Nasta, and everyone here at the Garage for having me. It's a real honor to show this. This is the Russian premiere of this film. And I'm sorry if I sound a little bit like Barry White. It's just I have a bit of a chest cold. So if you bear with me, I'll try to make myself understandable. So the question is about how I started working primarily with archives in my work. And I came out of a painting background, and so I was interested in showing the material of the film and having the film manifest itself as a vehicle for images, much like the canvas does. Through a bunch of steps from animation to distressing footage, I finally arrived at finding archival footage that time had eroded. First through the paper print collection, the primitive collection of films from the late 19th century, early 20th century, and then later really through Peter Delput's Lyrical Nitrate, discovering nitrate film and all its permutations. And I became interested not just how the material decomposes, but then trying to find, in my more recent work, a skeleton or a narrative or a historical context where there would be this visual component, but it would also reflect on the story of how the films got to where they were. So it started out as a visual fascination, and it became more of a metaphoric one.
I think all of your films, they reflect on complex relations between memory, dreams, and time. And once you said that archive is a kind of unintentional time capsule for you. Could you maybe comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, for this film is quite literally an unintentional time capsule. I won't reveal too much of the plot, but commercially, silent films were worthless once talking films came into fashion. And because these films were very flammable, they were the nitrate based, it was in the interest of the town to dispose of them in the most ecological way they could. And so they found a way to throw them away, and they inadvertently preserved them for 50 years. And so what was an effort to get rid of them actually became an inadvertent preservation. It's quite literally a time capsule of newsreels and films that were popular 100 years ago. Because of the scattershot manner in which they were disposed of, there are no complete copies. There's no 7 reel feature, there's reel 1 and reel 5, or a single reel newsreel. But it is a fascinating portrait of what was in distribution in North America 100 years ago. With this particular story, it's such a fantastic discovery that in some ways I feel like people became more interested in the story of how they were discovered and the fantastic nature of that than they were in the contents of the film. So even though the discovery was made 38 years ago and they were preserved, something like 33 years ago in their entirety, nobody has really examined what's in all these reels before now. And, there was, with the exception of the Max Sennett and the Lionel Barrymore and Todd Browning, the big names that would surface, nobody did a thorough examination of the newsreels or some of the lesser characters. So that's still to be done. This film doesn't purport to be an encyclopedia examination of the collection, but it is, like you say, a time capsule of what was being shown then, and of the 372 titles that were preserved, you'll see a few seconds of 124 of them, so basically a third of the collection.
I find it completely fascinating how you work with the aesthetics of archival footage, because I guess it's very important for you to kind of not to restore it, but rather to keep it, in this decayed, ruined form. And in that sense, this the damaged texture of the materials, it becomes also like a metaphor of, it provides a feeling of melancholy and nostalgia, and it's all about this feeling of loss, that something has been lost and can be never found again, even though it's a found footage.
Well, I think because these films are singular, they're for the most part the only copies that exist anywhere of them. It's important to be reminded that they are part and parcel with the vehicle that brought them there. In other words, the images are specific to these physical reels, and these physical reels all have specific markings. Ironically, it's not nitrate decay as you would find, you most definitely would find on any collection this size from this era. But because of the way it was preserved or really disposed of, they suffered very little nitrate decay. What you see is water damage, these sort of white fingers on either side of the frame, which archivists refer to not admiringly as the Dawson flutter. It's sort of very specific to this collection. And from my point of view, it like I said, it reminds the viewer that these were a physical vehicle that contained images that had to, endure time, much as our own bodies have to endure time. The film is set up with a bunch of faces and heads and names, stories that are individual, and in a way I think of each one of these films as a person or an individual.
Yeah, once you even compared like an archival, a cellulite reel to a human body, indeed, because like both are getting old and getting destroyed in the end. So in that sense, what do you think about the digital archive, which is like constantly produced today? Because like today you make a picture, a selfie, and it's immediately archived, so it's kind of indestructible. Is it different for you from like this kind of, let's say, classic nitrate archive?
Well, certainly. I mean, it would be hard to choose the 533 selfies, that were specific to this town, but in a way, time and the specificity of how these films were disposed of has made a curatorial selection for us. Part of what's sort of mind-numbing about the digital age is that there is no curation. It's just all out there. Yes, in theory it's archived, but in fact it's an overwhelming mass that we can't really grapple with. So taken from that standpoint, this is actually a very small and specific number of images that time has selected sort of beyond all comprehensibility about the degree to which fate and chance has allowed these films to be screened here today is really quite remarkable. I guess also, you know, when you think about it, we are products of a digital age now. There's some people who would say that the nitrate or acetate, the analog film, is more organic and would have, you know, more of a correspondence to who we are as a people. I'm not sure that's true. We're also electric beings. Our stories have always been told electrically. We are electric. So I'm not sure that the digital media is any less organic or any less human than the nitrate stock or any other analog stock. It's easy to get caught up in the romance of that. It is the lingua franca that we all communicate today, and we shouldn't divorce ourselves from that. I think we should embrace it. Does it have the capacity to last for 50 years in a swimming pool? No. We know that all of our media will become obsolete maybe within 5 years, or, you know, unless we keep jumping platforms. We all have that experience every year when we're told we need to buy a new drive or a new update or something like that.
In fact, it's also very fragile.
It's very
fragile.
Yeah, it's absolutely extremely fragile. I was very fortunate to work with the Museum of Modern Art on this project, and they insisted that we make a 35 millimeter print from the digital file. So it's nice to know that there is a copy of this film that will outlive me anyway.
The film has so many layers. I think that it's kind of an epic tale of the birth of American nation and American capitalism, and it's beautifully intertwined with the birth of cinema. Was it something you were thinking about while you started this project, or it was also a journey for you, so it was kind of also a discovery for you that those kind of images, you know, that you found can give a spectacular insight into so many, you know, fields?
Well, I did have this idea because you can, of course, there are many different years you can place as the beginning of cinema, but one of the widely accepted ones is 1896, which happens to be the same year that gold was found in Dawson City. And when gold was found in Dawson City, it essentially ended millennia of indigenous people living there peacefully, hunting, trapping, fishing. Overnight, that entire world changed. There's a clip that says the end of the rainbow, and that's meant, you know, quite literally. And with the introduction or the discovery of gold and the introduction of white men and European settlers into this incredibly remote corner of Canada, something changed, and with it came cinema. So I knew that using that year as 1896 was always going to be important, and that I was going to be telling two parallel stories. What I didn't know is what I was going to find, of course. And there was remarkable supporting material, even material that wasn't in the swimming pool itself, that wasn't part of the archive. And then the extraordinary footage itself, which told a very different relationship between corporations and labor than is told today in our news, at least in my country. This is the inexorable and unfortunate march of capitalism that's crushed this town. And the only thing that's standing in the way of that relentless march were the labor unions. And so the more I found on the material about labor and organization and anarchy as in the face of this burgeoning corporatization and mechanization of the labor, the more I realized that was an important part of my film. So it's true, I sort of had this overarching narrative in mind, but it was colored by the little pieces of the puzzles that I found.
Okay, thank you so much, Bill. Enjoy the film. Unfortunately, Bill is not feeling well, so
I've seen the film.
Yeah, I know. So we'll let him go back to the hotel and have some rest, and I hope you will like the film. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Evgeny.